The Jacksonville Daily Record's Karen Bruni Mathis uncovers Jacksonville's latest commercial development and business news. Stay informed with the Jacksonville Daily Record, available online at jacksdailyrecord.com and in print every Thursday. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, it's the biggest stories of the week. 10 years after the leader of a veterans charity was charged with running an illegal gambling scheme, he's charged again. The state takes a second look at allegations of teacher misconduct. Florida lawmakers take aim at DACA recipients. Metro Park is slated for a facelift, and St. Johns County taxpayers may pay the price of unmanaged growth, literally. We'll talk about all that and more on our Friday Week in Review. Then, from holiday performances to must-see shows in the season ahead, Jax Play's lead theater critic joins us and sets the stage for the upcoming season. You can join the conversation on air by calling 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at WJCT.org or reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President-elect Trump says if the federal government is facing a partial shutdown, he wants it to start now, while President Biden is still in office. He issued the call on his social media account this morning. Congress needs to pass government spending legislation quickly, or the partial shutdown will start late tonight. NPR's Deirdre Walsh says last evening the House rejected a spending bill backed by Speaker Mike Johnson.
It failed because a significant block of the Speaker's own Republican colleagues joined most Democrats and tanked it. Even after President-elect Trump endorsed the deal, this Republican deal, and threatened any Republican lawmaker who voted no. Most House conservatives who voted against this criticized the decision at Trump's insistence to add a 2-year increase to the country's borrowing authority without any spending cuts.
NPR's Deirdre Walsh reporting. Earlier this week, congressional leaders had unveiled a bipartisan spending plan for the government, but that was also tanked by Trump and his billionaire ally, Elon Musk. The man charged with killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson is now in New York facing federal charges. From member station WNYC, Samantha Max reports.
Federal prosecutors charged Luigi Mangione with murder, firearm, and stalking charges. They say he took a bus to New York City and waited outside a hotel where CEO Brian Thompson was staying for an investor conference. Then, prosecutors say Mangione shot the CEO with an untraceable ghost gun and fled to Pennsylvania. A new criminal complaint cites a letter addressed, quote, to the feds that police found after Mangione's arrest. It also quotes from a notebook where officials say he wrote about his plans to target the insurance industry. Mangione was already facing state charges in New York and Pennsylvania, including for murder as an act of terrorism. For NPR News, I'm Samantha Max in New York.
Amazon drivers nationwide are joining strikes against the online retailer. From member station KVCR, Anthony Victoria has more from a picket line in Los Angeles County.
Get everywhere we go!
The Teamsters' decision to strike follows what it calls Amazon's refusal to negotiate labor contracts and working conditions. Vanessa Valdez has worked as a driver at the company's facility in the City of Industry for 6 years. She says she's striking because while her workload is increasing, her pay isn't.
I would love to have job security, to know that I have a place here in another 6 years and not be let go as I age.
An Amazon spokesperson accused the Teamsters of misleading the public and using illegal tactics to pressure workers. Randy Corgan, the director of the Teamsters Amazon division, says the union isn't doing anything illegal. For NPR News, I'm Anthony Victoria in the City of Industry.
Amazon is among NPR's financial supporters. On Wall Street and pre-market trading, stock futures are lower. It's NPR.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Travelers arriving at Jacksonville International Airport will now be greeted by a smiling Donna Deegan. A cutting-edge hologram-like platform now sits alongside JIA's iconic piano and rocking chairs in the courtyard of the terminal's security area. The mayor's lifelike 3D image welcomes visitors in English, German, Japanese, French, and Spanish.
Ubicado a 15 minutos al norte del centro de Jacksonville, FOIA también sirve como aeropuerto de la región para destinos turísticos, como Amelia Island.
The life-size video makes it appear as if there is a real person standing there. And pretty soon, airport officials say you'll be able to push a button, select a language, and ask the mayor about places to visit on the First Coast, and she'll answer them. Jacksonville is one of the first cities in the U.S. to use the holographic messaging tool. A Florida lawmaker is resurrecting a failed bill from the last legislative session that would restrict the types of flags that can be flown at government buildings and schools. State Senator Randy Fine filed the bill for the upcoming legislative session that starts in March, and it would ban flags that represent a political viewpoint. Fine is also running in the special election for the Congressional District 6 seat that covers parts of St. Johns and Putnam counties. It's left vacant due to Representative Michael Waltz's appointment to the incoming Trump administration. This afternoon, highs will be in the mid-60s under sunny skies, and it'll be breezy. Mostly clear overnight with lows in the mid-30s inland and mid-40s closer to the coast.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, some familiar faces emerge in a multi-million-dollar illegal gambling scheme. Lawmakers move to eliminate in-state tuition for Dreamers. Local school officials urge the state to reopen its closed investigation into teacher sexual assault allegations. A revisioned Metro Park focuses on maintaining access and trees. And the cost of one instance of unmanaged growth in St. Johns County is $40 million. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by Steve Patterson, reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Ann. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Also, John Daigle, longtime former political reporter and political consultant here in town. Hey, John.
Good morning, Ann.
Good morning. We're also joined by the legend, the man himself, Frank Powers, recently retired, but a longtime assignment manager at News4Jax. Hey, Frank.
Hi, Ann. I yet live.
You live. He is risen. He's here. We were supposed to be joined this morning by Jacksonville Free Press editor Sylvia Perry, but she was unable to make it today. So we're a threesome. We're a foursome, I guess, if you count me. Anyway, let's start with
Those government censors are already perking up.
Let's start with a high-profile gambling bust this week, Steve. You were the first to report on this, and there is a lot of history there. We'll get to that, but if you can just start by catching us up on what we learned this week.
So last week there was a series of arrest warrants served on people who are charged with operating what I still call internet cafes that are now operating apparently illegally, and the city has had internet cafes or adult arcades, whatever the term of the moment is, for a number of years. At one point, if you went back like 5 years ago, there was an estimate that there were maybe 160 of these operations around the city, and maybe 2,700 jobs in this. And so then 2019, the city banned what the city referred to as simulated gambling devices, those being the main tool of the of the internet cafe, and so the question becomes, okay, you had 160 business owners or business owners operating 160 places, and they're being told, well, we can't do that anymore. How many of them just said, okay, I'm going to go away and I'll go sell insurance or something? Basically, this month, the sheriff's office went around and served warrants to a number of people who had said they were just in the same business they'd been in for years, different locations in some cases. But anyway, so we had 12 people who were arrested in total. Some were for big felonies, some were for very minor things.
And so this operation was titled Fish and Chips, John. It was a state and federal and local bust, but JSO kind of led, and there was a lot seized. I mean, they said they had $2.5 million in cash, well over 200 illegal gaming devices, 52 guns. They seized 15 vehicles and 2 homes. So this is, a big set of arrests, and also with some very familiar names involved.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the details of what was in all the arrest warrants and what each person in the current bust was arrested for, but I am very familiar with the big news story and the big bust that happened years ago when they first went after the internet cafes. And I kind of agree with Steve. There were a lot of people who got involved with Allied Veterans because they were a local nonprofit that was doing good work for veterans. The internet cafe thing was a business, a related business with Jerry Bass and some of his friends. But there were a lot of people. Now, full disclosure, I mean, Lieutenant Governor Jennifer Carroll, former Duval County Bar President Kelly Mathis, Paul McCormick. Full disclosure, my agency did some PR work for Allied Veterans because they were a nonprofit doing good work for local veterans. It's tough. The internet cafe stuff.
And we should just be clear. I mean, the big scandal and the bust many, many years ago was linked to, it was called like Allied Veterans.
Yes.
It was
Of the world.
Of the world,
yeah.
57 arrests.
And they
in
were a
2013.
nonprofit, but some of the leaders of it were making money off this internet cafe thing, which was sort of a separate but related to the nonprofit. And it's hard because it's clear that the leaders of this group were profiting off a loophole in the law that exploited people who had gambling addictions and were using these internet cafes. But the loophole in law was there. I mean, to me, I kind of liken it to, my wife gets mad at me because we have rats in the backyard. And the rats come because I have bird feeders in the backyard. So I put bird seed out in my feeders, and I like to watch the birds, but that also attracts the rats. And so she blames me for the rats. And her solution would be get rid of the bird feeders, which I don't want to do. And it's kind of like, to me, it's the analogy is, hey, if you really want to get rid of these internet cafes, you need to go ahead and close the loopholes in the laws and really make them illegal, because it's been debatable, whether or not the law means that these internet cafes are illegal, even after the big bust that occurred years ago.
Frank, you well remember this earlier bust.
I remember the morning clearly. We got tips the night before that the raids were going to happen, and we had reporters at several locations as the cops went in and shut them down. Let's put this in perspective. This is an Allied Veterans 2.0. It's 3.0. There were raids like this in 2021. The loophole is still there. After Allied Veterans of the World, the state legislature rushed to put a new law into effect. The loophole was still there, so they just proliferated.
And the city put a law into effect
Right.
as well.
Well, these busts weren't just in Jacksonville. If you look in other media publications, they've been going on since October elsewhere in Florida. But there's no risk. People forget that all those arrests, 57 arrests in 2013, one conviction, and that was overturned on appeal. Nothing happened to all those people.
Well,
Charges were dropped.
They all pled out, though. I mean, they all took plea deals,
Yep.
including
For no jail time.
no jail time. And as you say, just one case that went to trial
That
and
was
a
Kelly
conviction.
Mathis. He was convicted, sentenced to 6 years. He was granted an appeal bond. The appeal worked, and that was the end of it until 2021 when there were raids again. And
But
here we are again 3 years later.
and his conviction was overturned.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Mr. Mathis is still an attorney, or is an attorney again, and is, by the way, representing one of the people who was arrested last week.
Would that be Jerry Bass?
Nope.
Oh.
So Jerry Bass was involved in the prior Allied Veterans scandal. He was very high up in that.
Jerry Bass was the national commander.
Okay. But there were other big names in that bust. I mean, we alluded to the fact that, the lieutenant governor, she ended up resigning over
yeah.
this. Jennifer Carroll. She was Rick Scott's lieutenant governor.
Yeah, she had a good political career, and that pretty much ended.
Yeah. Also, the head of the Fraternal Order of Police and his top lieutenant. So Nelson Cuba was the head of the FOP at that time, and he was accused of all kinds of things, including money laundering and sort of covering up for these illegal gambling facilities by directing police officers elsewhere. And all of those charges were essentially dropped when he pled.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that that was sort of frustrating about this. There, people handling the prosecution back, it's been 11 years ago now. They were content to take pleas and basically say, well, there's a big fish we're going to go after. That big fish was the one attorney who was convicted, and then his conviction was reversed. So you don't have a consequence for the rest, and so so you have this question of if you really say we're dead serious about this and we're going to nail you to the wall if you're arrested. Well, if that happens, then what impact does that have? We don't know.
Well, so, I mean, is there any reason to think that things will be different this time around? Obviously, there are huge amount of resources at the local level. I can't remember how many, 150 some officers deployed serving these warrants.
120.
120, okay.
Well, I guess, and the question is, and again, Steve will know more about what's in the arrest warrants than I do. If it was about illegal guns or whatever, if it's just about operating internet cafes, then I think the solution, like I said, is get rid of the bird feeders, pass a law that outlaws them. It sounds like in this case that there was much more involved other than just running internet cafes.
There have been homicides. I can think of at least 6 homicides that have happened at these internet cafes, and some of them have been manslaughters. Some of them have been the bad guys go in with the guns, and the security officers are taking them out. But at least 6 that I can think of about the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, in the time that JSO was handling this operation, this investigation, which began in March of 23. From then until last week, the sheriff's office said there had been 2 killings two killings that they classify as murders at internet cafes, and 18 robberies and a few dozen assaults. I think it's just a couple dozen assaults.
A lot of free cash sitting around there makes a
But I mean,
inviting target.
I would imagine those kind of same statistics hold up for strip clubs or dog track or poker rooms. I mean, I can't imagine that those are alarming statistics, but there certainly are other establishments that attract undesirable patrons.
Yeah.
Agreed.
The sheriff's office called this a crime accelerant. And as you said, one of the people killed was a guard who was working, a 28-year-old security guard working at Dragon Arcade. That was just a couple months ago.
That was in October.
Mm-hmm.
And last year there was a guy who was acting as a security guard. There was a robbery. The man wasn't armed. He just beat up the manager, grabbed the cash, ran out the door, and the security guard went outside and fired at the guy as he was running away. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter.
What about, another big name that was in this bust that has been associated with these internet cafes, but was also a former city council candidate, worked under 4 mayors, worked for the city forever. Everybody kind of knows Robin Rucab.
Azem.
Yeah. So was that element, it's kind of what you were saying, like, what are these people going to do if you shut down their business? Are they just going to take up a new career, or are they going to just shift and find a new location?
Right. In 2013, when the Allied Veterans thing became big news, Rucab Azam was already in the internet cafe business, and she was very straightforward about it. No one was accusing her of doing anything terrible at that point, and so she talked to one of my paper's reporters then, and said, and basically presented herself as being someone who was operating an internet cafe within the boundaries of the law, and said, "So what do you want us to do?" And so she is apparently
The boss.
still in the business, and exactly, and the arrest material says that the other people referred to her as being the boss.
So the arraignments are going to be in January, Steve. But I mean, to Frank and John's point, if this loophole hasn't been closed, is there a sense that there will be a different outcome than there was in the original Allied Veterans scandal?
I think that that probably we're going to have more focus on money laundering. Money laundering was one of the elements of these last arrests, because there's a lot of money, and it's not that hard to make a case for it. There are technical points you got to do to make a case for money laundering, but if you follow through on that, if you say, yeah, here's this subject that is not very interesting, it's not going to be something that excites a jury. But if you follow through on that and say, okay, I will go through as a prosecutor the tedium of assembling the set of facts I need for this, well, there are significant penalties with that. So
The bonds, I think, were surprisingly large, Frank,
Yeah,
or perhaps
Robin Rook
not.
had $3 million bond for racketeering.
Yeah.
Another thing that
Why so high?
they think, well, bonds are set to either ensure public safety or to ensure appearance. Someone thinks she's a flight risk, my guess. Another thing that happened at Allied Veterans of the World, that whole thing fell apart, is they had an undercover informant that was going into all these places, and he was developing information from them. And then right before the whole thing was supposed to start with the trials, he recanted everything. The state's star witness in Allied Veterans of the World basically said, never mind. And that's why so many of the charges were dropped and so many other defendants took pleas that resulted in no jail time. So it'll be interesting to see what the evidence is this time and if it holds up to what will be, I'm sure, a very aggressive defense strategy.
Yeah. Well, if you're just joining us, I'm talking to Steve Patterson, John Daigle, and Frank Powers about the headlines of the week. If you want to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email comments or questions to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org, or you can reach out on social media. You can also watch our live stream if you want on Facebook or our WJCT YouTube page. I want to move on now to the results of an investigation actually by Jacksonville today, led by education reporter Megan Malicote, who's been covering this story for months. But it has to do with allegations, once again, at Douglas Anderson School of the Arts, which has been plagued by a number of allegations of sexual misconduct by teachers. This is one particular teacher, Corey Thayer. John Daigle, the issue most recently to emerge in this reporting was the fact that the state had closed the investigation into the allegations of a 14-year-old who said that she was essentially raped on campus multiple times by this teacher. The state said that she wouldn't cooperate, and that was why they closed the investigation. But emails show that her lawyer offered, to make her client available in multiple venues, and also provided a sworn transcript, a sworn testimony, with her allegations in it to the state, and the state still didn't pursue it.
Yeah, this isn't a story that I have any inside knowledge on it. Jacksonville Today has done great reporting on this story. I mean, from a political standpoint, I have a huge feeling that a lot of what came out of that investigation and some other recent scandals inside the school system was a big part of why we saw sort of a watershed moment in November with huge change in leadership, both at the superintendent level as well as at the school board. So, there's a lot of legal complications with the incidents that have happened at Douglas Anderson, and I'm sure that's going to be years probably going through the process. But from my standpoint, it's interesting how those issues at Douglas Anderson and a few other schools contributed to a huge sea change in the leadership at the school board. And it'll be interesting to see how this new conservative majority on the school board handles those kind of issues, and if they handle them differently than they have been handled by the past school board, which was not a majority of your Moms for Liberty kind of supporters.
Which it is now. And it is, in fact, the new chair, Frank, April Carney, that asked the state to reopen this investigation based on that reporting from Jacksonville today, saying, first of all, the student had a civil settlement with the district in which she understood that he was going to lose his teacher's license, and it's still active.
The problem with the Thayer case, from what I've read, is that they don't have the evidence to back up her allegations. The difference between Thayer and Jeffrey Clayton is they did. JSO did a controlled call with the girl in that case. They also had all the texts. And then he winds up eventually pleading guilty. So they can reopen the investigation, but you need evidence to back up statements. And there is still, I hate to use the word bombshell. We used to use that a lot in the business, but there's another one coming. The outside investigation into this has been going on for more than a year. I'm told when that final report comes out, it will be a bombshell and will probably spawn future or further prosecutions.
I think it's interesting, though, Frank, because the Department of Education was putting a lot of pressure on the former superintendent and the school district for failing to report crimes on campus.
Something still unexplained.
But
why didn't he? The guy who was in charge of that, and he eventually retired, why didn't he pass those information and those reports along?
But in this case, it's the state that didn't appear to follow up. I mean, it is, to your point, there has to be evidence to bring a case, but that's completely different than saying we were not given access to the victim when they were given access to the victim, or we don't know the details of the allegations when they had a transcript a year ago.
It smacks of a cover-up, and that's what's going to come out in that report.
Huh. We can't wait for that, Frank.
I don't know when it's going to be. When I was still working, I was told by the end of this year, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Steve Pedersen, obviously this is a ongoing issue for the school district. This is just one of 6 teachers removed over allegations of inappropriate behavior since 2023. And it is a premier, prestigious school in Duval County for the arts.
Yeah. And I think the school district has been trying mightily to find some way to convince the world and themselves and the people who work for them that they are taking steps to put this behind them, to keep this from happening again. They have this Know the Line public relations initiative they did to. It's basically a website that was set up, lays out standards to use to control teacher interaction with students, and actually any adult interaction with students, and that is something that's actually there were policy changes that the school board adopted as well that are incorporated into those that would prevent faculty from contacting students except under certain very controlled situations.
Yeah, it is. I'll follow up on Steve. I've done mentoring with public school students through communities and schools, and when I did that, you build a relationship with students, and it often becomes a really close relationship. I remember one of the students I mentored, 10 years ago, he's still contacting me, but we work with communities and schools, and this year, a couple of the hard things that we had to do is the new policy says if you're a mentor to a student and you come into the school, you can't hug your student when you meet them. And I remember that. I can't imagine sitting down with the student I was mentoring and not being able to give them a hug before we started, talking. You can't contact them except through very approved channels. And it's really going to me, as a person who's done that kind of mentoring with students in the schools, it's really going to have an impact on how anybody in the school system, teachers or volunteers or others, can interact with students, and that's a shame. I think some of that there'll be a big loss because of some of those new rules.
Yeah. We've got a call from Susan in Mandarin. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Yes, I wondered if you could. I think Ann said that Thayer was accused of rape, but according to the way I read the article, he was accused of statutory rape since someone underage can't consent to any kind of sexual relationship. And, you know, based on the recent suit that Trump filed where someone said that he was convicted, I guess, by the jury of rape when it was actually sexual assault. I think we should be clear on our terms.
Yeah, that's a good point, Susan. Specificity matters. And yeah, this would be, I don't know what the actual legal charge would be. He isn't charged with anything. These are allegations that are not proven.
Right.
There isn't any criminal case pending that we have any idea of. And so we should be clear about that. But yeah, there's obviously a difference.
There's
between
a phrase that covers a lot. It's unlawful sexual activity with a minor. With regard to those types of cases, and unfortunately there've been a lot of them in all districts around here, what prosecutors run into is that the kid who's making the allegations, after it all gets blown up, turns out they were in love with the guy or they were in love with the gal, and they won't cooperate. So then the prosecution is left with trying to get something, usually a misdemeanor conviction, without the cooperation of the victim.
Yeah, a lot of those end up as child abuse cases. So if you're just joining us, we're talking about the week's big headlines. If you want to join our conversation, give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to shift gears and talk about the start of what could be many immigration crackdowns in the state legislature. John Daigle, one in particular that has risen to the headlines this week is Senator Randy Fine, who is wanting to repeal in-state tuition for so-called dreamers, people who don't have documentation, are in this country, but basically came as children who've been going to schools in Florida throughout their lives.
Yeah. I mean, it really makes you think about, as a very young Green reporter at the Times-Union, former City Council President Eric Smith once said to me, in politics is like the hula dance. Every movement means something. And in this case, certainly there's so much more behind this than just passing an immigration reform law. Fine is running for the seat that's being vacated by Mike Waltz, the U.S. Representative Mike Waltz. He is leaning heavily, trying to get the MAGA base and Donald Trump's support in his push to win that special election in April. In doing so, he has proposed a number of sort of red meat MAGA legislation that is primarily designed to promote himself as the MAGA candidate in that race. He's not only got this piece of legislation targeting DACA students at public schools, he's also thrown out some legislation to ban stuff like Black Lives Matters flags in Capitol buildings and rainbow flags in state buildings. And mainly, again, it's mainly designed to set himself up as the MAGA candidate. And honestly, it's probably a pretty smart strategy politically. We saw in November it works. Will it make this, part of the argument on its face for the legislation is it'll save money because these DACA students are paying in-state tuition at like $14,000, $16,000 a year versus out-of-state tuition at over $40,000. So the logic is, it's a cost-saving measure because it's going to force these students or other students to pay that $40,000. Truth is, it's not. I mean, these dreamers, these DACA students are not going to all of a sudden start paying $40,000 a year. They're probably going to withdraw. And I will tell you, as someone who's taught as an adjunct for almost a decade at Flagler and UNF, and I've had DACA students in my class. They are among the most motivated, dedicated, hardworking students I've met. I don't think this bill, if it passes, is going to make schools better. I don't think it's going to save taxpayers money. I think it's primarily, again, probably a very smart political move to set Senator Fine up as the hardcore MAGA candidate in that special election.
Frank, this is would repeal a 2014 law that was signed by Governor Rick Scott, who is,
Right.
Very to the right these days.
Fine voted against it then.
Yeah, fine voted against it
Yeah.
then.
I think the phrase that they're using, if this bill becomes law, is to sunset it at some point. I don't know if the legislation has a specific time frame for the sunsetting. But, we'll see how that works out. But if it passes, it's just going to contribute to the ongoing brain drain that Florida has yet to address. Young kids are getting their education in Florida, and then they're leaving. That's not good for the state.
But I guess I'm just wondering, how has the debate shifted so dramatically that, something that Rick Scott supported a decade ago is now being, full-throatedly denounced by people of his ilk here in his own
John
state.
said, we just saw, it works resoundingly.
Yeah. And I guess Steve, the kids in this are not perhaps as sympathetic as perhaps you'd think they would be. I mean, if you're just talking about kids who've gone to school, attended public school in Florida, have lived here their whole lives, not being eligible for in-state tuition.
It depends on how sympathetic a person happens to be on this. I mean, they are long-term residents of Florida. In-state tuition is traditionally a tuition that is set for Florida residents, and so the difference here is that these are folks who have immigration status, may lead to them leaving the country at some point. They're trying desperately to not leave the country, but
And as you said, Ann, this is probably not the only anti-immigration, anti-migrant legislation we're going to see in this legislature. It's which way the wind is blowing right now, and the path to political fortune probably includes a hardline stance against immigration, at least for the current time.
Practically speaking, what does it mean for a bill, though, that's introduced by somebody? I mean, the legislative session doesn't start until March.
Yeah.
And Randy Fine is going to be gone by then.
Yeah.
So practically speaking, what is the significance of a bill that he introduces?
It's a great campaign talking point, especially in the district he's running, which is a very red, very conservative Republican district. And like I said, if I were, advising a candidate running in that district, I would be advising them to run as far right as they could.
And this district includes like Flagler, but parts of St. Johns County, St. Augustine.
And I think some of Volusia as well.
Mm-hmm. And as you say, a very red district.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to move on now to a kind of a St. Johns County related topic.
Moving on being a facetious term when you're talking about driving around St. Johns County.
Yeah, this is a traffic related issue that is near and dear to your heart these days, Frank.
I was just on County Road 210 last night around rush hour, bringing my grandchildren home, and even my 7-year-old is saying there's too much traffic. But it's just, IGP, St. John's Parkway at the 9B turnoff, anybody who's driven through that at rush hour. It's State Road 13, it's 95. It's just too much traffic, and these are self-inflicted wounds, especially along IGP. Now the county is asking for $40 million in grants from the state and federal government, which I find amusing because they were asked 2 Novembers ago for one penny to deal with an ongoing $500 million infrastructure backlog. And that referendum got blown out of the water. I think it was like 60-40. So, but we've also seen people in St. Johns County, and I have friends of mine who live down there, and I've heard it them from years, too much. In the last 2 election cycles in St. Johns County, we've seen county commissioners who were perceived as being beholden to developers be thrown out of office.
And to be specific, this is, John, a $40 million ask that the county wants so that they can build a off-ramp from 95 that sort of directly funnels into some of the projects that have created this enormous traffic bottleneck, including this giant Buc-ee's. There's a Bass Pro Shops.
It's
There's
just opened right next to the Buc-ee's.
a Walmart slated for that area as well.
It's been an interest. I've lived in St. Johns County for about 25 years. I live right off of Racetrack Road where a lot of what Frank talked about is happening. Frank and I were talking before the show. It's an interesting dynamic because, growth, St. Johns County has been very pro-growth for a long, long time. And several years ago, you started to hear about the big push for affordable housing because there was great business in St. Johns County, but there was very little affordable housing. So over the last 7-8 years, there's been a huge boom in apartment building and affordable housing. And then, that's not the only contributor to the traffic problems. But what I've seen where I live is the traffic was always bad, but it was never, crippling until all these apartment complexes to address the affordable housing problem were built. And now that has really kind of tipped the scale and broke the camel's back. And now you've really got huge traffic congestion problems in St. Johns County.
Steve, it doesn't seem like it would take enormous forecasting powers to know that, something called World Commerce Parkway is eventually going to be drawing a lot of traffic. But the people who live in that area seem genuinely caught off guard by the fact that they just literally can't get out of their neighborhood anymore if they're trying to, if they live across from the Buc-ee's or that whole enterprise there.
Well, I think that there's been this balance that people mentally made. They said, okay, we can live with this. We like having the idea of a Buc-ee's. We want to have a Bass Pro Shop. That sounds kind of cool. And so we want that. And then you get to, well, it's actually built and it gets a little messy. And in the same sense that there is down the road, there is a ways in the future, I should say, there is work that is finally supposed to be completed on completing the what I still think of as the Outer Beltway. The was now called the First Coast Expressway. Basically, an outer loop of an interstate, and that is going to just facilitate getting people going between Clay County and St. Johns County a whole lot more, and that's going to add to the total number of people passing through St. Johns County. I'm sure there will be some folks who are, they're not just going through and not getting off the road at all.
Right.
So,
John, the county voted to make this $40 million off-ramp one of their top 5 priority projects because unless it's in that ranking, it sort of, I guess, doesn't rise to the level of standing any chance of getting that state funding. So they want this to be before lawmakers as a priority for them. But there are also improvements happening on another road that was poorly planned. State Road 16 is currently under construction. I don't know how you could put a price tag on how many, vehicular deaths have occurred at that exit and off ramp and because of traffic backing up on that exit and off ramp. And, even when those projects that are there were being approved, I well remember sitting at those county commission meetings where they were allowing, traffic excess and that they were going to allow these strange frontage roads and everything to exist.
Yeah, I think I agreed with Frank. $40 million, it sounds strange to say, but truth is $40 million from the state is not a big ask, but it's a drop in the bucket, and it's a fraction of probably what's needed down there to really address the problems all over the county that are occurring because of new businesses coming, new hospitals, and the affordable housing that's coming with those new businesses. But, St. Johns County has always been very willing to pay for education. Every referendum that's gone up to add a penny for teacher salaries or that kind of stuff is passed easily. They have not always, as Frank pointed out, has been willing to pay for the growth that comes from people like me who moved there because of the great education system. They're gonna, this new breed of elected officials at the local level, if they're not able to stop growth, they're going to have to say, okay, if we're going to have that kind of rapid growth, we're going to have to be willing to pay for it. And again, even if they get the $40 million from the state, it's a lot more is going to be needed, and eventually the county residents are going to have to step up and pay it.
What about impact fees for developers? They are in place in St. Johns County, but
you can't even say that word in St. Johns County if you want to stay in office. You do not say impact fees in St. Johns County.
But they have fees, though, that function the same as
probably
an impact.
But we don't call them impact fees.
And you say that because so much development money puts people in office in St. Johns County.
Frank's right. There has been a few sort of slow growth people elected, and that is historically rare in St. Johns County. But it's still a county where the government system is dominated by people who like growth.
I mean, just give us a window into the campaign finance reality, since that's your wheelhouse.
Well, it's very complex. I've followed Duval County politics for most of my career, and I understand Duval County politics pretty well. But St. Johns County politics is a whole nother can of worms. And you look at some of the power brokers down there, the Hudson family, and most of those who are powerful in politics down there are connected in one way or another with the development industry. I was surprised as anybody when we had county commissioners who were not pro-growth elected in the last cycle.
It was almost a second one.
Yeah.
One got in, one got into a pretty close race with an incumbent.
And that's mainly because of the new blood that's been moving to the county, people who are not from St. Johns County who are moving there. But it's still very hard to run and win office in St. Johns County unless you're a pro-growth politician.
I think that phrase is the new people coming in there are what they call shut the door behind you types.
That's right.
But it is in some ways too late for these roads that we're talking about, because they are already over capacity and there is a lot more in the pipeline, growth-wise.
I mean, like I said, County Road 210, it's a nightmare. They're turning that from a 2-lane into a 4-lane, and that's been going on for a year and a half. And it's just, remember that scene from the end of Field of Dreams? When the camera pans back and you see the cars forever into the horizon, that's what it looks like on 210 at night.
I want to take a call from Richard in Anastasia Island. Good morning, Richard. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Listening to the show, enjoying it. Having moved down from Atlanta, I scratch my head sometimes at the traffic comments about down here. But that whole area up there where the Buc-ee's is, I thought it was interesting that Costco and Marriott weren't mentioned as part of that whole piece of land. And the fact that people vote down penny taxes, to me, seems like cutting off your nose to spite your face. You push growth and development, and I understand a lot of the local people have suddenly realized, but you kind of have to address what's happening here and now, what the reality is, and how to fix it going forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate the call. I just want to talk briefly on a different topic. We saw the new plans, Frank, for Metro Park unveiled. You've seen a few iterations of this, as have I, but we're back to a new beginning.
I'm glad they're keeping the urban forest concept. I wish they would bring back the hat shell. I mean, when I got to town, that's where the Jazz Fest was.
Yeah.
It was neat. The last concert I saw there was, of all people, Jim Belushi. I think that was one of the last ones before they finally closed Metro Park and took down the hat shell there. But that is such a valuable piece of land, underused. Unfortunately, Jacksonville does a great job of tearing stuff down along the river and not so much of putting stuff there in its place, but at least everybody agrees. I think there were a bunch of different plans, and they seems to have culled the best from all of them. So I can't wait to see that become a vibrant part of the functionality of downtown Jacksonville.
And just hoping it's got more staying power, John. I mean, there was the big kids campus. There was millions of dollars put into that. And it just sort of then, I don't know, disintegrated.
Yeah, I haven't seen the plans. I'm like Frank. I have very fond memories of sitting on that lawn and watching jazz festivals year after year, and I will always miss that. But I'm optimistic. I mean, with the Four Seasons coming in there and the new stadium, it's not going to be able to stay the same. It's going to have to change. This whole area that we're sitting right now is going to be a huge area of development for the next decade, and I'm anxious to see the plans, and I'm optimistic that it's going to be wonderful. It's definitely not going to be the same as some of us who have been around here and remember that band shell and have those fond memories hold.
Yeah. I just want to take a minute before we wrap here to remember our colleague, Mark Spain. He was a news anchor and reporter at my former station, First Coast News. He held the same role at Action News Jax from 2007 to 2014. And he announced a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer exactly 3 weeks before his death. We just wanted to express our condolences to his wife and children and to his many friends and colleagues here on the First Coast. He will be greatly missed. Steve Patterson, John Daigle, Frank Powers, thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. We'll be back in just a
Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, finding the who, what, when, where, why, and how that led to the accident is critical to proving the truth.
More at TerrellHoganLaw.com. ServPro, independently owned and operated. Whether it's water, mold, or fire damage, they'll help you restore your home or business. ServPro is available 24/7. ServPro, helping to make it like it never even happened.
On the next Fresh Air, singer and guitarist Bonnie Raitt. She's one of this year's Kennedy Center honorees. CBS will broadcast the ceremony Sunday. She'll talk about her early musical influences, like bluesman Mississippi Fred McDowell. She took off a semester from college to learn from him and other blues musicians. Join us.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
On the next Florida Roundup, a roundup of some of the biggest news throughout the state this year.
It was an aggressive campaign to encourage voters not to vote for this amendment.
It really is going to put issues important to Floridians at center stage in the White House.
The highest storm surge we saw from Helene was around 9.3 feet.
A sushi bar that cost $38,000.
I'm Tom Hudson. Join us Friday, noon until 1.
The mood in Congress feels far from festive.
It's not a Christmas tree. This is not an omnibus, okay?
Speaker Johnson is forced to walk back his own spending bill after Donald Trump and Elon Musk weigh in. Also on 1A's Roundup this week, the latest on what's now a looming government shutdown. Police in Wisconsin look for clues in another school shooting, and who will give Sesame Street a new home.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, if you're ready to absorb a little holiday cheer and get a preview of the theater season ahead, you are in luck. We are joined by Ray Hollister, Executive Director and Theater Critic for Jack's Plays. He's here to give us the best of the boards. Hey, Ray, welcome back.
Good morning. Good
How
morning.
are you?
Absolutely great.
Good. So it is full swing holiday season. Obviously, we're
Yes.
in the middle of it. If people are looking for something on stage, what are you recommending?
Well, there's one show that actually has nothing to do with Christmas. It's Summer, the Donna Summer musical. If you're into disco, that is definitely the place to go. It's the only place in town where you can see a live show that has nothing to do with Christmas.
This is
right now.
Alhambra?
No, it's at Players by the Sea.
Oh, Players by
Yep,
the Sea. That's
yep.
right. I'm sorry. We actually had
You
them
had
on.
them on the
Yeah.
show, yeah. The interview's on our website at jacksplays.org. But there is so many fun Christmas shows. A lot of them are recreations of old TV shows, old movies, and they are super great. A Christmas Story, the musical, out at the Alhambra is really fantastic. We got a review of that on jacksplays.org. Super fun, it's by the same folks that did Dear Evan Hansen.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's a really great musical. It's
Yeah, that's
surprisingly
excellent.
a great recreation. But also like Spotlight Event Center is doing A Year Without Santa Claus, the classic TV special. And then Apex Theater is doing It's a Wonderful Life, the live radio play out at the St. Augustine Amphitheater. And that one's really fun too.
Oh, that's really special. There's also this arts collective theater that we had.
Lee Hamby on for, yeah.
Yeah.
That's more of an experience than
Okay.
a show. There's a lot of music. I think there's a couple skits in there, but it looks like it's really a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, so that gets us through the holiday season, but
Yep.
there's a lot.
It's going completely dark. All the theaters are going dark on Christmas Day until January 7th. But do not fear, my musical theater nerds. Wicked is coming back into theaters with a sing-along version on Christmas Day through January 2nd. So if you've been holding it in, just wanting to scream out the lyrics to Defying Gravity, now's your chance.
What is the sing-along version? What does that mean?
It literally is like karaoke. They're going to have the lyrics up on the screen, and everyone is encouraged to just belt their hearts out.
Wow, that sounds awful.
Yeah,
but-
Cinemark and Tinseltown and AMC Theaters, Regal, they're all doing it.
That is not my theater experience that I'm going for, but I know that there are people out there that will love that.
Oh, yeah.
What about once we are no longer dark in the theaters? What are some of the big shows that you're looking for next year?
So next year, one that is really close to my heart that I love is The Women of Lockerbie. It's going to be at Theater Jacks in January. This is a story, I'm not going to cry. It's a story about the women that collected and washed and packaged the clothing of the victims of the Pan Am 103 bombing. It is a
Over
fictionalized
Lockerbie,
story.
Scotland, yeah.
It's a real thing that happened, but it's a fictionalized story of it. But it's a really beautiful story of just grief and healing from those events. It's really I'm really looking forward to that one, although it's going to be a tearjerker, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Some more fun ones though. Mamma Mia is coming to the FSCJ Artist Series, so you get to see the Swedish Superstars music, and it's just like the movie. It's a kind of a recreation.
It's
of
all
the movie.
ABBA music.
All ABBA, yep. And the Southern Fried Funeral at the Alhambra Theater and Dining.
What is that?
That is a really, really funny. It's a comedy set in the South about this family, and the patriarch of the family dies, and chaos ensues, and it is really a blast. I saw it recently at St. Mary's Theater, and actually our Carlos, I can never pronounce his name right. Carlos, you're gonna kill me. He was actually in the show as well.
From WJCT
Yes,
here.
from
Yeah, okay.
WJCT. Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
It
Yeah,
was
he's
fantastic.
a real theater nerd.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then Orange Park Community Theater is doing Crybaby. That one's a lot of fun. And Grease. So a couple of rockabilly type shows coming out next year too.
And there are some shows that are coming into town that are also just like books that are beloved, like the Roald Dahl. There's actually competing Willy Wonka and
Yeah.
Chocolate Factory
Yeah,
shows
so
coming to town.
there's going to be Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory at the same time. One's going to be at Artist Connection Theater. The other one's going to be at the Alhambra. So you get to experience a lot of chocolate in the month of June.
And another one that's based on a book, which surprises me, is Misery.
Misery, yeah, at
That's like a Stephen
ABET.
King.
ABET is doing it. Yes, that one looks really interesting. I'm going to be excited to see that. Horror is really fun in the theater.
Is it? I feel like it'd be so difficult.
It's very uncomfortable, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a movie that I can't actually bear to watch. What about the stuff for kids? There's like Peter Pan, The Jungle Book.
Yeah, Jungle Book at Artist Connection Theater in February. Peter Pan is going to be at the FSCJ Artist Series. That's the Broadway tour coming through. That one looks really fantastic. I'm excited about that. Christchurch Creative Academy is doing Cinderella. They're kind of a lesser known theater, but they're really, really talented. A really great group out there.
Well, all of this info is on jacksplays.org, which is a terrific place if you are looking for something to do in the theater, if you want to look at listings, if you want to know more about a particular actor or director. There's bios and profiles there. It is a wealth of great information and a super resource. So, Ray Hollister, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And thank you for listening. That's our program. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future segments, you can reach out to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Send them in. If you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can find our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. The executive producer of First Coast Connect is David Luckin. Our show is produced by Stacey Bennett and directed by Brady Coram. Jamie Valet is our associate producer, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us Monday when we talk about the year's best reads as well as perfect books for holiday gifts. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com.
On the next Electro Lounge, we take you around the world for the best chill-out down-tempo music anywhere. Join us Saturday at 10 p.m. only on WJCT News 89.9 for the Electro Lounge.
This is WJCT